Those of us who share your struggle for human rights and against apartheid have been somewhat disappointed by the models of human rights that you have held up since being released in jail. You've met over the last 6 months 3 times with Yasser Arafat, who you have praised. You have told Gaddafi that you share the view on, and applaud him on his record of human rights and his drive for freedom and peace around the world. And you have praised Fidel Castro as a leader of human rights and said that Cuba was one of the countries that's head and shoulders above all other countries in human rights, despite the fact that documents at the United Nations and elsewhere show that Cuba is one of the worst. I was just wondering, are these your models of leaders of human rights? And if so, would you want a Gaddafi or an Arafat or a Castro to be a future president of South Africa?
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies. We have our own struggle, which we are conducting. We are grateful to the world for supporting our struggle. But nevertheless, we are an independent organization with its own policy. And the attitude of every country towards, our attitude towards any country is determined by the attitude of that country to our struggle. Yasser Arafat, Colonel Gaddafi, Fidel Castro support our struggle to the hilt. There is no reason whatsoever why we should have any hesitation about hailing their commitment to human rights as they are being demanded in South Africa. Our attitude is based solely on the fact that they fully support the anti-apartheid struggle. They do not support it only in rhetoric. They are placing resources at our disposal for us to win the struggle. That is the position.
Mr. Mandela, you've said a number of very controversial things in that last.
One of the problems we are facing in the world today are people who do not look at problems objectively, but from the point of view of their own interests. That makes things difficult, because once a person is not objective, it is extremely difficult to reach an agreement. One of the best examples of this is to think that because Arafat is conducting a struggle against the state of Israel, that we must therefore condemn him. We can't do that. It is just not possible for any organization or individual of integrity to do anything of the sort.
I don't also want to leave the impression, if I might just intervene with one point, I don't want to leave the impression that this is only going to be a Jewish black issue. There are a great many Cuban Americans in this country who will be just as offended by some of the comments you've made about Fidel Castro and Cuba.
No, Mr. Coppell, I don't agree with you. I am saying that it would be a grave mistake for us to consider our attitude towards Yasser Arafat on the basis of the interests of the Jewish community. We sympathize with the struggles of the Jewish people and their persecution right down the years. In fact, we have been very much influenced by the lack of racialism amongst the Jewish communities. In our own country, in the political trials that have taken place, when few lawyers were prepared to defend us, it has been the Jewish lawyers who have come forward to defend us. I myself was articled, I'm a lawyer by profession, and I was trained to become a lawyer by a Jewish firm at a time when few firms in our country were prepared to take blacks. And as I have said, we have many Jews, members of the Jewish community in our struggle, and they have occupied very top positions. But that does not mean to say that the enemies of Israel are our enemies. We refuse to take that position. You can call it being political or a moral question, but for anybody who changes his principles depending on whom he is dealing, that is not a man who can lead a nation. Apparently, Mr. Coppel, you have not listened to my argument. If you have done so, then you have not been serious in examining it. I have replied to one of our friends here that I have refused to be drawn into the differences that exist between various communities inside the USA. You have not commented that I am going to offend anybody by refusing to involve myself in the internal affairs of the USA. of the USA. Why are you so keen that I should involve myself in the internal affairs of Cuba and Libya?
No.
I expect you to be consistent. I don't know if I have paralyzed you.
No. I'm afraid, Mr. Mandela, that paralysis does not set in quite that easily in my case. The point... since I've just about recovered from my paralysis, I want to come back to that question in just a moment, but first, we need to take a break. Why are you so insistent upon maintaining sanctions at a time when it can be argued that the South African government has made more concessions, your release being only one of them, than it has ever made in the past 40 years?
I should know better about this matter, Mr. Coppel, than you.
No doubt.
After all, It is the ANC, not the government, that is responsible for the present talks. We have been hammering the government since 1986 to meet us, and in spite of the humiliating and insulting conditions they tried to impose on us before they could agree to meeting us, we nevertheless had sufficient patience and sufficient commitment to peace as to continue hammering them to meet us. They have eventually done so, but despite the fact that the talks are now on, apartheid is still in place. The police are still killing our people, as they've done over the years. Vigilante groups are openly arming themselves for the specific purpose of attacking progressive groups and progressive leaders. The right wing is also arming itself openly, and they say they are doing so for the purpose of destroying the ANC. They are calling for some of us to be hanged. Why would you think that we should now relax our strategies? What has happened?
Let's move on to the next question. Raised with you the issue of the money that you are raising while you were here for the ANC. Can that not be perceived as rewarding one of the sides in the struggle? And you were making the point that we should sort of stay out of this rewarding business.
Well, I don't think that that means the same thing. What certain sections of the international community are saying is that Mr. de Klerk should be rewarded because he has done something to deserve that. And the first difficulty I have about that is that Mr. de Klerk has done nothing. We have done something. What are you rewarding him for? That's the first question.
Well, let me try and give the answer and have you respond. Your release, the release of other political prisoners, the recognition of the ANC, of the South African Communist Party, now the lifting of the state of emergency in all provinces but Natal, those are actions which the ANC and your supporters have been asking for many years, and some people would say, as each of these demands is met, the ANC is moving the goalposts on the field.
Now, Mr. Coppel, you are entirely misinformed. In the first place, the ANC ought never to have been banned. Secondly, my comrades and I ought never have been sent to prison. The state of emergency ought never to have been imposed. You are crediting Mr. de Klerk for rectifying his own mistakes, his own injustices. You must remember that in enforcing apartheid, many of our people have been killed, and many of our people have been executed for resisting a policy which the government now admits is an evil system. What are you rewarding him for as against that background? That is the question.
Let me turn the question around if I may.
Just a moment, Mr. Coppel. No. We have come here to say we are fighting against injustice. Help us as the masses of the people of South Africa who are living under repressive laws, a repressive system. Help us to destroy repression. There's no question of reward. We are not saying to the outside world, help us, reward us for having negotiated, initiated the peace talks. We are saying that reward should go to the people of South Africa as a whole, not to any particular organization.
Could it not then be argued, Mr. Mandela, that you will use the same arguments no matter what, because clearly you would argue, and I think with some justice, that until South Africans have one man, one vote, until the system of apartheid in all of its aspects is removed, those are all injustices by your definition, correct? Are you then arguing that sanctions against South Africa should not be lifted until every one of those injustices is removed?
The people of South Africa, the frontline states, the Organization of African Unity, the non-aligned movement, the General Assembly of the United Nations are all agreed that until fundamental and irreversible changes take place in the policy of the country, sanctions must be maintained. I am not here putting forward the views of an individual or of an individual organization. I am putting to you what is being said by the entire world. They insist that sanctions should be maintained until fundamental and irreversible changes take place in the policy of the country.